Hey guys, welcome to our fortnightly Wednesday chat. I'm Michael, this is Emma.
Hi.
In case you haven't met us before, we swapped sides today. I get the handheld mic. Apparently Emma's feeling lazy.
Yeah, something like that.
We actually got a really good question earlier in the week from one of our, I suppose, viewers, listeners, whatever you want to call it. But
People who knows us.
yeah,
So we met Will from
Crags.
From Crags initially, and then he came down. Well, actually, he came down with Crags at show and was there for a couple of days last year.
Yeah, and he sent us a really cool question, which we thought we'd talk about tonight. Before we do, though, it's International Women's Day tomorrow, I believe.
It is International Women's Day tomorrow, and tomorrow will be the 80th year that Western Australia celebrates International Women's Day.
Oh, there you go. So I didn't know that.
There you go. You learn something new every day.
So just a big shout out to all of the ladies in gaming out there, mums, daughters, cousins, sisters, all the varieties of female gamer out there. So
yeah, I think it's about recognising the role. I would like to recognise the role that women play in gaming, and that's the women that actually attend games. And so we think one of the very few tournament organisers in Australia that actually have female players attend, which is really exciting for us.
yeah,
So we've got a couple of fairly regular attendees come to our events. Admittedly, they're still well in the minority.
yep. But speaking to some of the East Coast organisers, particularly in regards to rankings and 40K, which is something I've been dealing with a lot of lately. Yeah, we're one of the only states to have any ranked female players, which is awesome.
Yeah, it's fantastic. So there's the female players. There's obviously the female TOs. There's at least one of them.
She's going to be TOing WATC in a couple. What was it? 6 weeks away? 5 weeks away? 6 weeks away? So I can play, which is awesome.
Yep.
She might even be TOing Linebreaker in a couple of weeks because I might be playing as the ringer.
Yep.
It's good for my rankings.
Then there are also the women who are supporting their kids, their husbands, their partners, their girlfriends to play and to actually, they're buying them the models as gifts. They're supporting them. They're
letting
putting
them paint
up
until
with the
4 a.m.
Yes, that's exactly it. And giving up weekends with family so that they can attend events.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
And hopefully we'll keep seeing more women attend events, either in the
Most
support
definitely.
role, but hopefully more across the tables.
Yep.
And we know there's a couple taking some breaks at the moment because there's babies being born, and
no, these people who keep having kids or are starting to have kids.
are starting to have kids. But yeah, so just a big shout out there to every woman who is involved in gaming in any way, shape, or form, be it actively or passively looking after family members while the boys go off to play.
Yeah. So celebrate International Women's Day tomorrow. If nothing else, it's an excuse to have a blueberry muffin.
I was going to suggest going out and buying the new Morathi model because that's a woman, and that's a really cool model, and they can't really argue with it because it's International Women's Day and you're supporting the women. Okay, she's a big, like, tentacle-headed temptress with a snake tail that tries to take your heart out, but she's still a woman.
Anyway, so to today's topic,
Tim is right. Kids equal titans. There's several people in our world that know that whenever there's a child present, there's a titan.
Yeah, no more children for us. We can't
I'm still owed a titan. So yeah, William, who's just joined us online.
Oh, apparently it's also Betty White's birthday. There you go.
Thanks, Will. It's an interesting piece of trivia.
Yeah.
There's plenty more about her actually, but like
we
won't leave that one.
Yeah. So read out there.
Will's question was, how do you both feel about model proxies, both as individuals and as TOs? There's a whole range of proxies and proxy sins, from minor different weapon arrangements that you've got modeled to the unit of Space Marines that are now Jump Pack Assault Marines, to the Land Raider that is now my Orc Battle Wagon. Totally wrong dimensions of the model, making it bigger or smaller than it should be. Lastly, that I can think of, feel free to add more, the other company's models used as a unit of the game that's not designed for by the original company, or the dreaded Lego armies. He was having a chat with a group of friends, and there were some wildly different opinions on the matter. It's probably a pretty good topic given the events we run.
I think that's a fairly decent statement, that there's always going to be really different opinions on the matter, and we can give ours, but obviously it's certainly open to debate.
I'm also going to beg forgiveness because I've still got a really bad cough from the cold we've had come through the house. So if I lean off to one side and turn the mic off, that's why.
Yeah.
So proxies. I suppose it comes down to how you classify proxy versus conversion versus, like, there's a few different areas in that world.
There is. I think before you even get into that, to me, see, we were so prepared. We talked about what we're going to talk about, but then didn't actually. Normally, we run through and go, "Oh, I think this is an interesting part." Now we're just kind of running with it.
This is live. Let's go.
Yeah. That's it. There's no second take. Yeah. So I think before you even get into what counts as a proxy compared to a conversion, I think it really depends on the kind of game that you're playing and who you're playing with.
Yeah, there's certainly some armies, game systems, I should say, that would probably offer the better options for those stand-in models.
Yeah,
I'm thinking.
I wasn't even getting to that point yet. I was more getting to who are you playing with and what kind of.
Yeah, okay, that's probably a much fairer point to start on, because I've done it through the years. One of the guys watching us now, Brett, he and I used to play games so regularly it wasn't funny. And there were all sorts of models brought out to cover bases while we were testing units and playing games. I was
thinking of a different friend that used to come around and play with his models that were cut out of paper and stuck onto 5-cent pieces.
Oh, no, Jeff, I'm sure that if Jeff hears this, he won't mind me adding him for it. He used to get green army men and blue tack them to bases and then print out a picture of the unit and stick it to the front of the army man, because the army man was about the right size.
Yeah.
And for him to try out new units, I thought that was a great idea.
And that's the difference, is that you set those informal rules between yourselves.
Oh, you don't set rules with Jeff.
You had that unwritten agreement that was fine, whereas we, I guess, have explicit rules when it comes to events. So that's what I'm talking about. It depends on where you're actually playing and who you're playing with and what kind of contracts you've got.
Yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, any game you have includes a social contract, and when you come to a tournament, the TO essentially is the one setting that contract, which you agree to abide by when you come to the tournament. So when you read a player's pack and it says, no, you can't use X, Y, or Z stand-in models, you're essentially agreeing to those house rules.
Yeah.
That the event organisers putting in place. So it's a very good point, though. I mean, you can go from those paper cutout ones. I remember years ago, I would have been 12 or 13, maybe.
So decades ago.
Yeah.
Not years ago.
A friend of mine and I, 4 of us actually, who got together, and we decided to play a big game of Warhammer Fantasy Battle. But none of us could afford to play
anything.
Well, yeah, we couldn't afford anything. So getting a 10,000 point army for 4th edition Warhammer Fantasy Battle was just unreachable, let alone for 4 of us. So we basically bought one box set of each unit that we wanted to have. So I bought a box set of Dragon Princes of Kalador, and I had a box set of the Silver Helms, and I had a box set of the different elf units. So I had between 5 and 10 of each of these models. And then we just measured out on cardboard a grid that was how many bases in that unit.
Put one
and then put the blue tacked them in place and gridded it up so we could cross out models as they died. And we played a game that way. Now, funny thing about that is that I believe that who does it? It's Kings of War. Is actually now you don't remove models from the units, so the grid that you make up front, the models don't come off as the unit dies. So essentially, we were decades ahead of Kings of War. True story. But no, I think the most common thing for gamers these days is proxying units and models before they buy them, because at the end of the day, it's an expensive hobby. So,
and we've talked before about how important it is to practice regularly with your models before you start making big decisions over whether or not you're going to change them up. So it makes sense to actually proxy them, so that you can, make sure it's worth the financial outlay. Yeah,
for sure. I mean, I think it's a very rare gamer who can just afford to go out and blow $500 on a new army, a whole bunch of new units, and then not feel bad about it when 2 months later.
I don't know that it's a rare gamer. I think there's a certain population of gamers that do
well,
that.
What I was actually going to say is not feel bad 2 months later that they bought all these models and then they don't use them anymore. Because these days, I tend to playtest things and try them out, and I'm very cagey. Unless there's a really good deal going, I'm very wary of buying anything before I played with it and decided that's actually what I want these days. Whereas there was a time, probably a decade ago now, where I would have just gone, bugger it, I'll buy it anyway. So that doesn't happen so much anymore. Certainly not for us. But once you move into the actual idea of using other models from another game system in a different game system, that's when you actually hit the proxy world as well, because it's not just a case then of using a Space Marine to stand in as an Eldar warrior or an Orc to stand in for an Elf. You're now talking about buying miniatures from another company that fill in or stand in or count as, I suppose is another way of putting it, a different model for a game system they're not intended for.
Yeah.
One of the most common ones I've seen over the years is using the board game Zombicide. Zombicide has, I think the core box has over 100 zombies in it, and then the expansion packs have between 20 and 50 zombies. And these days, if you've watched our YouTube channel, you would have seen the game with Galen Platel, and she used about 40 Poxwalkers. And the zombies, if you put them on the right size base, are really about the right size and shape for those. And when you can go and buy a box of Zombicide for $100 and you get 100 zombies in it,
Yeah.
and the full board game to boot.
Well, it's not really useful if you've taken all the zombies out.
But you can do, though.
Yeah, go and get some plastic army men from Kmart to replace them with.
No, but I mean, even I bought the Murder of Crows Zombicide expansion
Yeah.
to use them as Razorwing flocks at one point there, just to see whether I wanted to go and expand that as an idea for the army. The FAQ stopped that, but that's fine. The fact is that those models, with a little bit of work, could have been made to fit on a 40mm base, and then just
Could have been. They weren't. They just sat in the dungeon.
now they're used for Zombicide.
Which you didn't know we were going to buy.
It was only $15. It's fine. Anyway, they could have easily been made so that they came off their 40mm bases and could continue to be used for the board game.
They wouldn't have been. But
they wouldn't have been, no, but they could have been.
Yeah.
But at that point, you are starting to use other games models for something they're not intended for, and that example kind of goes all the way through the game systems, because they're about to release a futuristic version of Zombicide with exo-powered armored human survivors on a spaceship against space zombies.
Yeah.
And I feel like there's a definite implication there, and certainly I can see some models being used and crossed over for gamers. So I suppose, I mean, on a personal level, when I'm playing casual games with my mates, I don't generally care about proxies and stuff if that's what we're just kicking around and having a game.
Yeah. And I guess that's what I was talking about with that social contract thing at the beginning. It depends where you are, who you're playing with, and what kind of, what rules you're setting. Yeah.
I mean, William, who posed this question to us, says, I feel bad about it even if it's 2 months later and I'm still using them. There are opponents that I play casually that I would still never bring proxy models to if I could help it.
I think Will's just talking about buyer's regret.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Probably.
Yeah. Which is complete. I totally get that.
Yeah, so do I, actually.
You don't.
I do. I just don't tell you.
You hide that incredibly well.
It's the only way I get to buy more.
Yeah.
Mark says, what about using other models? For example, the new Daughters of Cain counting as a Khorne Demon army. I really like the models and want to mix up the Khorne Demons I have with some differences. See, it's a hard one. I think ultimately there's a few different things that you have to consider before you proxy models in games consistently. The first is the game system itself, because line of sight, how they handle base sizes and model sizes varies game to game, and edition to edition for that matter. So if you look at something like Malifaux, because the models don't change, there's no real customization for them. You kind of buy the model and that's the model.
Yeah.
If you're running like Mindless Dead, which are the generic zombies type things that you can summon and raise and that sort of stuff, going down to Zombicide might be an option, because you only really need one card and you're just spawning these generic models. So using something from Age of Sigmar in Malifaux is kind of not ever going to happen. I think it's a very game system specific thing, where like Infinity is another one where all the models are very specific in what they are, and line of sight matters and those sorts of things. Yeah. So I think the best thing I can say with any of that sort of proxy stuff, if you're going to do it, is consider what they're actually representing, is the best thing I can say. If you're going to do it on a consistent basis over a period of time, particularly for events, first of all, you should always be talking to the TO before you go to that event.
And the players pack and see what it says in there.
Yeah. But using his example of the Daughters of Cain Witch Elves for Khorne Demon Army, the models go on, I I think the Witch Elves come on 25 mil bases these days, and I believe the Bloodletters do as well. So the base size isn't relevant; they're fine there. And putting
Having
them,
said that, you can always change
that's what I was
bases.
literally about to say. Is
Okay.
they're easy enough to swap.
Great minds.
They're both relatively like the Witch Elves are these elegant, svelte femme fatales. The Bloodletters are these gangly, skeletal demons. So they've both got fairly slim profiles in terms of what the space the model takes up.
Yeah.
The demon has a giant big sword. The elves have a pair of matched daggery type things, and the elves are leaping where the demons tend to be hunched over, but they've got quite long banana style heads. So in terms of a profile on the table, they're probably pretty close. I think you're probably better off using the Witch Elves as cultists or human, those sorts of things. But at the same time, I don't think there's necessarily a big issue there. A great example was at First Blood, actually, with local hobbyist Troy Keeley. He brought along his squat army, using all the squats and the trikes and all the tanks and all sort of stuff, and used them as Deathcall's Krieg, Astra Militarum. Now, obviously, the squats are space dwarves. And
That's so cute.
they were older than you, a lot of those models.
Oh.
Maybe not, but pretty close. You would have been a toddler when they came out, let's put it that way.
I was pretty cute as a toddler too. So there you go.
You didn't have the facial hair they do, though.
Well.
So he basically used cork bases to lift the squats up to the right height of a standard guardsman to make sure that there was no discrepancy in the line of sight.
Yep.
He made sure that all the weapons that he tried to make them as WYSIWYG as possible, and then when he couldn't, for lack of being able to source them or whatever, he made sure that there was a consistent result, so that they looked the same across the army. So if you saw a flamer, it was a flamer. If you saw a heavy bolter, it was a heavy bolter. I think a lot of those armies where you take all that care and effort to make them look cool, and you do all the right things, and you're doing your best to make them meet the criteria, I think the average hobbyist is just going to look at it and go, that's awesome, and not really care about it. It's when people take the mickey and are doing it for some sort of perceived real or fake advantage.
Or if they just can't be stuffed. Or, I don't have it, but I want it, so I'm just going to use this instead and pretend.
Yeah. Well, and that's what I mean about an advantage, because at the end of the day...
fair enough.
So I think using the Witch Elves from the Daughters of Cain as Bloodletters could work. I think any of those sorts of things, I've seen a few different tanks over the years used, and I've seen like auxiliary style armies where the Tower, a great example of that, where they have all the different alien races, and people have converted humans carrying Tower weapons with Tower guns and clothing and that sort of stuff, and they just count them as fire warriors. They're the right size, they're on the right base, they look the part, but they're a theme there. There's actually a lot of effort that goes into doing those sorts of things, and people think they're cool. So I don't think in those sorts of situations, I think it's completely fine and reasonable. And I think the average TO, if you send them pictures and go, hey, I want to use my squad army, here's some photos of it, here's what I've done, here's a photo beside a regular guardsman.
Yeah, that's it.
Is this all okay? Most TOs should just be going, yeah, that's cool, man. Like, that's awesome. I even had one today for someone from WATC. He sent me an email saying, hey, I've got some of the Adeptus Arbites models, which are circa early 90s, and they're in heavy carapace armor with shotguns and grenade launchers. And he said he wanted to run them as Astra Militarum Scions, Special Forces.
Yeah.
Now, you can't give shotguns to Scions. He's not got any shotguns anywhere in the army, modeled or rules-wise, and he's got no other Scions in the army with the hotshot las guns or anything like that. So they're essentially a very unique-looking unit. There's only 5 of them, and he wanted to use them as the 4 guys with shotguns as hotshot las guns, and then the grenade launcher as a grenade launcher.
Yeah.
And I said, look, they're on the right size base, they're the right size model. There's no possible chance of confusion anywhere else in the army because of the other things I've just mentioned.
Yep.
Based on that, I'm okay with it. It's the same thing as Steve Dundas, who's come to a few of our events with Black Templars. He wants to bring Adeptus Custodes to WATC. And the question he raised was he wanted to use the Forge World Terminators. And the Forge World Terminators are armed differently to the standard Terminators, the plastic ones that have just come out. So we've had a conversation about what my expectations are, both as a TO and as a player. And he's quite happy to meet those expectations. So I think when it's done for the right reasons, I don't have a problem with that sort of proxying and that sort of cool stuff happening. When it's done for the wrong reasons is when I kind of would be more inclined to say no.
Yeah.
So,
And I know that's something that when, because we do often have people messaging us say, hey, I want to use this as this, or I've custom built this. Can I do that? Or
well, when Owen brought his Orc pirate ship
yeah,
to First
which
Blood,
is awesome.
if you saw it, you'll know exactly what we're talking about. There might even be photos of it on the post from First Blood. I'm not sure.
I'm not really sure either. I took those photos however long ago.
Well, that's true. But he got in touch with me and said, look, these are the dimensions. This is what it looks like. It was probably a touch too long, but it was the right width. It was roughly the right height. But more importantly, it looked amazing. And he
I
made...
don't know that that's more importantly.
No, the event was a hobby event.
Yeah, it was a hobby event.
So from my point of view, the event was like he'd gone down the road of it, not for any advantage he thought he could gain out of it, but because he did a pirate-themed Orc army and had a pirate ship.
Yeah.
Could he have done to kind of chop the middle 2 inches out of the length of the boat? Probably. But if you saw it, you'd understand why. I'd just be going, no, it's fine. It looked amazing. And whenever someone did question it, I had a couple of people on the day question it. We went to him and went, cool, okay, you measure from here to here and here to here, and you know, and we adjusted the dimensions of it in play. And thankfully, the way he'd built it meant it was very easy to do.
Yeah.
So I think that's kind of a really great example of a counts as model where, yeah, it was too long, but at the same time, the resolution for it was very easy. Another really good one at the moment is base sizes, because
just before we move on to base sizes, so with that particular model, I'm putting you on the spot, sorry. With that particular model, that was a hobby event. How would you go accepting that for Masters?
Well, with Masters, I'd be saying to him, bring along a standard battle wagon model, so that if his opponent said,
you can't have
I don't want to play with that, he would have a standard Games Workshop original model, and that way he could use that in the game. Obviously, it wouldn't count for scoring or anything like that. It would just
have fun at work, Mark.
It would just be there so that players could feel like they know exactly what they're dealing with. Yep. It wouldn't have to go out for painting, scoring, or anything like that. It would just be a case of, hey, here is the correct model if you don't want to deal with my cool fancy one. And I'd hope that even under a Masters, like a really competitive event, and to be fair, I actually played against a very similar pirate ship to that at LVO in 2017. And you know what? Not once did I look at it and go, well, you can't have that. It's too big or it's the wrong shape. I went, that's awesome, and then blew it up.
Yeah, that I will admit that does seem to be a pretty, it's a pretty regular theme and trend when you're playing with anything that's got a cool model is I just want to blow it up.
Yeah. I don't know what everyone else's take is on that. I mean, like I say, I personally, at LVO, arguably one of the most competitive events in the world, I didn't care about it. I went, that's awesome, and blew it up.
Yeah.
That was kind of my response to it. I never once considered saying to him, oh, that's not the right size or shape.
Did you measure it and check?
I didn't care. Never once even looked. Like it had masts and all, like it was enormous. And it never once occurred to me to go, oh, that's not right. So maybe I should have. I still won the game, so it doesn't matter. But
I really need to get new glasses.
You can't read any of that, can you?
I can see.
We've got the laptop just off screen. Matt's saying that pirate ship is amazing. More than happy to play it. Yep, that's the right attitude in my mind for it. I really liked that conversion. I'd quite have. I might even try and get that on the channel so we can play a game with it because that was really cool.
That's cool. Yeah.
The other one that's come up a lot recently, and I've had hobbyists messaging me about this, is base sizes. There's an argument that goes around that
we're still getting people asking about base, and I know that it's for Age of Sigmar, but we're still getting people asking about different base shapes as well.
Yeah, so Sigmar still works with square bases.
Yeah.
It's not ideal.
It's totally off on a tangent. We don't really even need to talk about it, but it was just popped into my head, so it came out of my mouth.
No, the base size thing, though, it doesn't generally affect too much of 40k these days. It used to have a massive impact. The one key thing it does affect these days is auras. So when a model has a 6-inch bubble that affects X many models within so many inches, if you have a base size that is bigger than the base it is supplied with, that aura naturally becomes bigger. Now, obviously, you're still measuring the same 6 inches to the base as you do to the other base, from each edge of the base, but the area of the circle has obviously increased, even taking out the slightly larger base in the middle. So what that means is that your aura, instead of covering 800 square centimeters, now covers 900 square centimeters, which doesn't seem like a big deal in a tabletop war game. But if it means that you get 2 extra units that can then bubble into that space, then it does start making a difference. And I had a hobbyist send me some photos of a conversion they were working on for a Demon Prince. Now, the Demon Prince comes on a 60mm round base, and he wants to put it on a 100mm round base because it's a big conversion.
He'd rather it didn't fall over and break.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It wouldn't fit on a 60 the way he's posed it.
Yeah.
It's going to be amazing if he gets it finished. You know who I'm talking about? Yes, you do. Go and finish it.
I don't know who you're talking
No.
about.
So he came to me and said, hey, what do you reckon? I said, well, first of all, bring a standard Demon Prince as a backup to make sure that if there's any problems, you can just put it on the table. But my solution to him was actually to reduce the aura size from 6 inches down to 5 inches. So the base is essentially 40 mils wider than it should be. So just shy of 2 inches.
Yep.
If we reduce the aura from a 6-inch aura to a 5-inch aura, we're essentially creating the same bubble. It's actually a negative thing for him because he's essentially taking up more of that aura bubble with his own base.
Yeah.
But it leaves the same result in terms of area of effect. Now, I'd be interested to see what everyone else thinks about that as an option for fixing some of these issues with 40k auras and base sizes. If you're measuring the same distance, essentially, in terms of total area, does it matter at that point? If you're reducing the aura by 1 inch or by half an inch or whatever it is to accommodate that different base size, is that something you guys would be happy playing against? Couple of guys, Timothy says, I feel it depends on the player and what they want to get out of their experience. Yep, that's a very good call. And like we said earlier in the piece, I think that comes down to the TO setting the expectations. Aaron Jaw, I played against the Pirate Ship, didn't affect the game at all, was a very cool model. Yep, 100% agree, Aaron. William says, square bases in Sigma are the devil. You can get so many more units to move or block with them. That is true. I've got I've got one old army from the days of Warhammer Fantasy Battle, my Dark Elves that haven't been out in years that are still on square bases. There's no way I'm rebasing them. It's never going to happen. But if I brought them to Sigma, yeah, you have to, I suppose, make some agreements at the start of the game as to how you're going to deal with them because they are slightly different. But I think, again, that comes down to being able to, talk to your opponent and have an adult conversation. Timo,
we could run lessons on that.
How do you deal with, especially as in AOS, demons that now come on 32mm bases?
And they're very heavy and keep falling over. Oh, no, that's good.
Yeah, I can't see that either. That's Mike saying that they're front heavy and keep falling over. That's the horrors. Now, the horrors at least are plastic these days, so if they fall over, it's not so bad. But he has a point. The demons that come on 32mm bases, my demon army at the moment's on 25mm bases because that's what they were on when I built them and got them. Am I going to change them to 32s? No. They came with those bases. I don't necessarily know what the demons... Some of the demons still come with 25, some of them come with 32s. I think as long as you're consistent across the army, it's when you have a unit that are on 32mm bases and then exactly the same unit on 25mm bases that you start having these conflicts of, well, hang on a minute. But, if you're consistent, at least there's a consistent result across the whole game. Being 9 inches away from one unit and 9 and a bit inches away from another unit and then rolling 2 charges of 9,
yeah,
that'd piss me off because, they should be the same distance apart, essentially. So I don't see any major issues in 32. Like I said earlier, 32, 25mm, they're kind of interchangeable these days for 40k in particular. Yeah, see, I'm not sure, Timo. They could all be reboxed these days. I thought the Demonet still came on 25s. I'm not sure. But most of those models, it doesn't matter going from 25 to 32. I put a lot of my Eldar X-Arch models on 32s these days just to make them stand out a bit more. All of the Tau that I've just done, all the stealth suits that I've got came with 25mm bases back in the day, but the current ones are on 32s. So when I did them, I put them all on 32s just to make them consistent with the current rules today. I've had a few people look at me funny with my drones because all of my drones are on 32mm bases, like the proper 32s with a flying stand in them and then the drone. And people whinged because they weren't the standard clear plastic flying stands, which are 32 mils across. It's literally, the difference is the lip. So I can put a magnet under them. But I still had people whinging about that. So, I I don't know. I think if you're consistent with changing the base sizes over either from 25 to 32 or maintaining them on 25s, people can't really complain too much. Because if you're doing it on purpose to try and gain some sort of advantage, then
What advantage could you gain?
it's easy to spread them out. So if you're trying to create a no-go zone and you've got
Yeah.
10 models on 25 mil bases with a
There's
2-inch
10
gap, then
models,
25, then 2 inch, so you can obviously get more area effect.
Hmm.
It makes it easier to block off charge lanes. It makes it easier to surround vehicles, and so they can't disembark and destroy them. The flip side of having smaller bases, though, is when there's a 2-inch gap between models, it's easier to get those units through those gaps to charge things past. So there are pros and cons to both. There's also the bigger bases means you'll get more enemies in base-to-base contact with you, which can be a pro or a con depending on what the unit is.
Hmm.
So there's a few ways that can go both ways, and most of the time it sort of evens itself out.
That's what I was getting at. From what I can understand, for all the pros you get, you've then got the flip side with the cons as well.
Timo makes a point here. It's not so much the charge distance, but rather the piling in, because the 25 mil gives you the combat range. If you're within an inch of an enemy model, you can fight.
Mm.
So you have a model in base to base that's got an inch base, then another model on an inch base. Actually, they're not inches, they're 25 mil, not 2.54 mils, which means that technically you can get 3 ranks in fighting rather than 2. I think that starts stretching the friendship a little bit. 2 ranks is fine. 3 ranks, I'd start questioning it as an opponent. Matt says, how do you feel about models like Eldar jet bikes? They come on 32 mil bases, but they never stand and they always fall over on their stem. The oval bases look good and fix the issues that people thinking clipping the model or the base. My jet bikes all went on the standard flying stands for my Corsairs for 7th edition. My older bikes actually come on the vehicle flying stands because that's what they came with. So they're on the big bases. Again, it comes down to consistency. If you're going to rebase your jet bikes and put them all on the oval biscuits, that's fine because you're measuring to and from the base. The model's not relevant. As long as the whole army is done the right way, then the result is the same for every model. The only ones that will affect are things like an Autarch, whose aura will significantly change, at which point I'd probably put him on the biscuit base, like the big oval base, but I'd actually mount the clear plastic one
over the top
on top of that so that I could measure from the little disc for his aura rather than the whole biscuit base. And that neatly sidesteps the issues with the aura bubbles. And that's even a good way of doing it for any demon model. If you've like the one I gave earlier, that 100 mil base with a 60 mil, if you made like a summoning circle that was 60 mils,
and that had been my first thought as well. It could be a cool way to make a really awesome base to actually have that built up around it.
And like I said, it only negatively impacts you because you're giving up your aura space to essentially the base. So there's no modeling advantage there to do that. Love your accuracy there, Mike, but when you go down the dark path, please use 2 digits. 2.54 compared to 2.5. Yeah, spot on, Timo. Look, I'm not going to comment too much on AOS, though, because Mike Bourne says Timo's referring to AOS. AOS is still a system I'm learning. I'm not going to sit here and claim to be an expert in it or understand some of the intricacies of the game system. I would suggest that if you're going to do something counts as for AOS, then you should be aiming to put them on the bases that are currently supplied with the kits, rather than creating any sort of, if you buy a second-hand old army, rebase it. It lets you, kind of get around some of those perceived issues before you even start. Because if you turn up to a table with a square-based army of ogres from Mantic to play Age of Sigmar, you're presenting a number of barriers there for your opponent because the base sizes are wrong, the models aren't what I'm expecting, they're not armed the right way, they don't look like I was expecting, and you're essentially putting a conflict in place before you even hit the table.
So how many of those barriers can you remove easily and quickly?
And basing's an easy one most of the time.
Not one that you're prepared to do, but it is an easy one.
Look, if I was going to use my demons in a serious tournament, and I'm not likely to, but if I was, then I'd probably go and drop the $20 for the extra bases and just rebase the whole army. It'd take me a day.
I was going to say, it's not the $20 that's the issue, it's the time and the...
Well, I've already rebased that army once. It was a fantasy army. Michael is right. It's not the inch within an inch rule. It's more the actual number of models that can get in range. I've seen arguments where, because they're only 25 mil, not 2.54 mils, So you make base-to-base contact with the first one.
Mm-hmm.
The second one can fight because it's within an inch of the first, because it's got that 0.4 mil. Then you can have one immediately behind that, and because he's within an inch of a model that's fighting, he gets the fight. And then you can have a fourth one because he's within an inch of the second one.
Yeah.
So you can actually go 4 ranks deep and fight. Now, my gut feeling on that is those bases are meant to be an inch. They're not, because the conversion from
everybody
metric
rounds,
to
exactly.
the conversion from metric to
It's
imperial
like
is not
6
right.
what everyone goes, well,
Is 180, but it's not.
180, but it's actually not. Yeah.
So my gut feeling on that is that while Timo is 100% right, and that is something that I've seen used in a game, I would believe the intent there would be the bases are an inch, therefore it's 2 ranks, not 4. You might even manage 3 if they're slightly skewed.
Yeah.
But I'd feel a little bit dirty trying to claim 4 ranks fighting by using such a 0.4 of a millimeter. I don't know. I don't know. Depends on who I was playing, I guess.
I think it depends on a lot of things.
Yeah, that social contract's a really important part of all these
Yeah.
answers, I suppose. You could do a worst case scenario, buy new bases and just blue tack the square ones on top. Yep, I've seen that done before.
Mm-hmm. But then that does then create the fact that your models are taller than they should be.
Look, in some games that matters. I don't think it does with Age of Sigmar too much. I think having that extra base height for some models in Age of Sigmar shouldn't be a deal breaker. You guys can correct me if I'm wrong on that one. I don't believe it would be based on what I understand about the game. But that's probably a fairly easy fix. Although a 40 mil...
You can't just chop the head off. That's cheating.
No, you can't. 40 mil round, though, going to a 40 mil square base going to a 40 mil round obviously isn't going to work.
No.
But cutting the edges off the base and blue tacking it down would work. But I mean, ultimately, grabbing a scalpel and just cutting them off the bases is easy enough to do as well.
Yeah.
So I think stepping on from there, with our 40k events, we tend to allow not proxies, but counts as from third-party models. So a great one is Puppet Wars do an awesome demon dog that looks a lot like the dogs from Ghostbusters, the original Ghostbusters movies. Yeah. And a lot of demon players use them because they look amazing. They're cheaper than the current Games Workshop ones, and they're really dynamic, and they're that sort of hellhound look. And I've had people go, "Oh, you can't do that." And well, it's very clear what they are. They can't be mixed up with anything else. They're on the right base. Yeah. They're the right size and shape. So using them as a counts as
and those
flesh
are the
hound.
Things that we're generally looking for, aren't they? Is it clear what they are? Is it clear what they are? Can they be confused with anything else in the army?
Yeah.
Looking at, are they the right size? Are they the right shape? Is it going to impact on the game in any way?
Yeah, so like when you start doing head swaps from third-party models for your Space Marines or your Imperial Guard, no one cares because it's a head swap. It's your personal hobby. It's the way you like it.
Some people care. We don't care. Some people care.
Some people do care. Like if you're going into a Games Workshop store, then they might have an issue with that.
Yeah.
But at our events, you're not changing the profile of the model.
No.
You're making a cool conversion. It's the same with weapon swaps. As long as the weapon swaps are clear and consistent, then that's okay. If you've got a model that is quite clearly armed with a flamethrower and you try and tell me it's a Stormbolter, then I'm going to have questions about that. But if you take a third-party weapon that is their version of a flamethrower or a Stormbolter or whatever it is, and every single time that weapon appears in your army, that same weapon is used, then at that point, there's consistency there, and as long as it doesn't look like anything else that can be mixed up with as well.
And that's it. But don't tell us that 5 of them are this particular weapon and the other 5 are that particular weapon, because that's just not fair on your opponent.
No. So I think the trick with those sorts of third-party, after-party kits, if they're the right size and the right shape on the right base and are very clear and consistent to your opponent, there's no reason why we would necessarily just say no off cuff. It would be something that if we said no to you, we'd have a conversation around, hey, these are the concerns. But even then, I can't think of too many over the years that we've had that we've ever really said no to. Most of the guys have been pretty reasonable, and I've said I've seen stand-in Vindicare Assassins where it's just a different sniper model, and it's on the right size base. It looks like a sniper, that's fine. They even did a range of Tower Assassins at one point there from Wargame exclusive. I think they still even sell them. And there's a sniper one. There's like a samurai combat one. There's a creepy anti-psycho one. Now they're all completely useless because 8th edition doesn't allow you to do that anymore. But people
But
used
in 7th,
people used to use them in 7th, and it was very clear what they were. So in 40K's case, I think the main parts I suppose I want to clarify is that if it's on the right base, the profile's about right in terms of its silhouette, and it looks like what it says on the tin, generally there's going to be no problems. If you want to scratch build yourself a Sisters of Battle repressor, because Forge don't make the kit anymore, you get yourself a Space Marine Rhino and you put all the plastic card on it and you make yourself a repressor, that's fine. You know, if you turn up with Rhinos and say they're repressors, no, because the repressor is a bigger tank. It has a different profile. The weapons are mounted in a different way. They have different weapons on top of that. So I suppose any sort of counts as or proxy has to be reflective of what it actually is.
Yeah, and with 40K, it's relatively easy because everything exists. Everything's created by Games Workshop Warhammer.
Yeah.
So there's rules for everything, and it's all really, and obviously the same with Age of Sigmar. It's all really kind of clear and standard. It gets a little bit trickier. So for bolt action, we know that Infamous JT's just brought out a new range of Polish Warsaw models, which are fantastic, and it's awesome to see.
Yeah.
Like a small company, it's one guy who's brought out this range, but there's no rules for it.
No. So he's obviously, I mean, the Polish, you could probably end up using them as Germans. You could use them as the Russians. There's a few different ways you could put them on the table.
Well, so he's going through a process of writing out and creating a PDF with rules, and then going through the process of trying to get that all approved through Warlord Games. But in that situation, that's where things start to get a little bit trickier.
Yeah.
So I think with most of the games and they're not out yet, so we don't have to worry about them for the event that we're running in June. But so for a lot of the events that we run, it is actually quite simple.
I mean, a few years ago, Games Workshop didn't have models for every set of rules they had, and they do now. And there's a legal issue that took place, which has caused them to do what they're doing now, which is if it doesn't have a model, it doesn't have rules. I think we're probably in a better place now to adjudicate some of those things than we might have been 5 years ago.
Yeah.
With 40K and Age of Sigmar, I mean, 40K, there's so many conversion parts because the game has been going so long, and the possibilities for arming units and changing the way they look is just endless. And I don't think Age of Sigmar is in that space yet. I think the game is still such an infancy that there aren't any real third-party options for. I mean, not Warlord Games, Kings of War from Mantic do a range of fantasy miniatures, which I know some guys really like.
Yep.
There's obviously the older Warhammer Fantasy Battle models as well that you can use, and some of the older Fantasy Battle models are the current ones for Age of Sigmar. But ultimately, I don't think. I mean, you've got things like Reaper Bones miniatures, and some of those sort of more D&D driven miniature games that you could probably have models that stand in for Age of Sigmar.
Yeah.
But I don't think that's, when you look at sort of the qualities and what Age of Sigmar is, there's certainly the slant towards it from the company at least is we've released all the models. This is the range. This is the book. When you get to the table, this is what you should expect to see.
Yeah.
Whereas I don't think they're ever going to get to a point they can do that with 40K because
it's got 30, 40 years of history.
That's it. The game's kind of taken on a life of its own outside of the hobby, from a hobby point of view, because it's very rare these days that you'll find a hobbyist that you say, "Oh, is your army 100% Games Workshop?" If you've only been exposed to Games Workshop, it will be. But any of the veteran gamers out there, myself included, it's very rare that you have an army that's 100% genuine, because you'll go, "Oh, I really like that conversion part." Like I've been looking around for Tower Vespid, which are basically giant flying bugs, if you're not aware. And I kind of like the models. They've got a sort of a quaint, creepy look to them. But they're $72 for 5, and I don't really want to pay $72 for 5. So I've been looking for aftermarket kits. Now I've seen a conversion kit that comes out of, it's either Wargame exclusive or Puppet Wars, which is for the backpack and the guns that fit on a standard Fire Warrior, which means for the same price as 5 Vespered, I can get 12. I can't believe they're not Vespered Fire Warriors with like big winged backpacks and guns. So they're roughly the right profile. The guns look different. They're kind of clear in what they are. At that point, I can understand why hobbyists would go, no, I don't really like the alien bug thing. I want the flying Fire Warrior. One of the guys who, Ryan, here has a unit of them with his tower. So I think 40k is always going to have a looser TOs regulation, certainly from us, and I imagine from most of the world these days, apart from going to Warhammer World or some of those official events.
Yeah.
We're always more likely to go, yeah, you know what? It looks close enough and it's clear and it's consistent that we're okay with it.
I think conversions is something that probably needs to be touched on as well, and how those conversions can affect some of those things.
Yeah. I've actually in the battle report I just finished editing today, which I got up on Friday. It's a second game with my Sisters of Battle. I had a Vindicare assassin in that army. It's not the genuine Vindicare. It's from a time I converted it back when the units had unit sizes, so it didn't really matter how big the model was. It fulfilled like a silo, a very specific size. So it's a converted kneeling Vindicare with a big sniper rifle up with a big camo cloak and all the rest of it. He's 2/3 the height of the current model, and he's on a 25mm base, not a 32mm base. He obviously isn't on the base that he came with because he's essentially a scratch build. He's about 4 different kits bashed together. I didn't even think twice about it with Dave because it's Dave. Like Dave wasn't ever going to wasn't ever going to care about it.
Yeah.
I do have another Vindicare that's the genuine model on the right size base that I could take to a tournament and stand him in for if I needed to.
Mm-hmm.
But those heavy conversions, again, if you're going bigger, a lot of the time you're doing yourself a disservice for line of sight in 40k.
Yes.
But there's a lot of guys who are trying to get the older scale demon lords like Fate Weaver, who used to be, yay
So
tall
smaller,
on a 60mm base. Now he's on a 100mm base and he's this tall.
Yeah.
That, in my opinion, if it's a model
the models certainly have grown.
Yeah, the scale's crept up over the years for sure. It's a hard one to police as well because you could easily argue that as modeling for advantage. You're deliberately going out of your way to get the smaller model to hide.
Yeah, but then the flip side of that is I've been playing for 30 years. I bought this in 1997. So
I've already got it, yeah.
Yeah.
And I think that's the hard part about the game is that, like, I've got the original Eldar Avatar from 1989, 1990. He's shorter than a Wraithguard these days. He's not big at all. I've then got the current one, and then I've got a Forge World one as well, and each one of them slowly gets bigger and bigger.
Yeah.
And by Games Workshop's own rules, I could use my original Avatar, who is, yay tall, on a 25mm base because that's what he came with.
Yeah.
And he would get all the rules of the Avatar. Now, would I do that at a tournament? Probably not. There's a couple of tournaments I might. It's still not painted, so it's not going anywhere. But
it's not going to be an issue.
But I think, and it's very hard as a TO to go, okay, I know Mike's been collecting for 30 years. I know that that's a model he's gotten. Like if it was painted, and it was painted badly by 12-year-old Mike, and I turned up to a tournament with it, I think you could, as a TO, you might go, really? Like, what are you doing?
But that was an issue when you went down to a Crags event. You spoke to the TO and said, "Hey, look."
With the Wraith Knight,
yeah.
So when that was 6th edition.
Seriously, I have next to nothing to contribute to this. Every time I open my mouth, no, you finish the story. That's okay.
Well, you can finish it then.
No, it's too late now.
I've got would you know what the stand-in model was?
No.
That was really useful. So the stand-in model was actually a genuine Games Workshop product called a Towering Destroyer Knight from Armorcast back in 1989. And I had one of the then brand new release Wraith Knights, and it was assembled with it was assembled to the head, and the arms were on it, and it was on the base, but it had no guns or any of the paraphernalia on it. And I took a photo of it beside the Towering Destroyer Knight to say, look, they're the right height, they're the right size, they're on the right bases. And the guys at Crags went, yeah, it looks goofy as all hell because it's from 1989, but it's the right size, the weapons are correct, it's all good.
But we had a bit of a laugh about it. It was really kind of that sort of split opinion on it, wasn't it? So some
Oh,
of
some
the
people thought it was god awful.
well, some people are like, oh, I think you're stretching it a little bit there. And other people who have been playing longer were going, yeah, I want to see the model that was
Yeah.
30 years old.
And I think the trick with any of those is why are you using the older model? If you're using the older Fate Weaver model because you want something that's easier to hide and all the rest of it, then as a TO, it's hard to police. But like we've got a good friend, Brad Nielsen, who's painted a Fate Weaver model. He painted it for LVO, flew to LVO, and they released the plastic one like 2 weeks later.
No.
And he was gutted. Not because of anything other than the fact that he's a fairly slow painter and it took him ages to get that one done. And it got used once. And now he feels bad when he uses it. If he's going to use it, he uses it as Demon Prince rather than Fate Weaver because it's so small.
Yeah.
And that's kind of a good resolution for those older demon models. But at the same time, technically, they're the right model.
Yeah.
So I think if you're going to use those older models, you have to be willing to have some give and take.
Yeah. So is that, with the intention, does that come down to the same thing for conversions? So I'm going to have half a story and hopefully you'll be able to pull the rest up and finish this one for me. So there's a lot of things there. Is there anything there that needs to be?
Timo says you've got to start earlier so that one can watch you for longer. And then I'm assuming Richard, who's logged in as Objective Secured, says, is it past your bedtime, Timo? Yeah.
Past my bedtime too, Timo. I'm struggling.
We have to wait until the kids.
It's just not funny.
We have to wait until the kids go to bed.
I helped out in pre-primary today. It's killed me.
Mike Horton used the original avatar easier to hide. Yeah, that's why I don't. It's that sort of comment, why you are not my favorite Horton. Yep, I get that, Stu. That's fine. But,
all right, finishing my story that I'm
Yeah.
not going to be able to finish. So if you think back to about a year ago, we were in a Games Workshop store, Morley, talking to Rye, and Pete came along and you were talking about a model that was at LVO, and it was all kit bashed, and it was an incredibly expensive army because it was all like the conversions and all of these things that were put together. No, you can't help me, can you? You got anything?
I'm assuming that you're on about the Demon Engine army because it used. So it was a Brass Scorpion, a bunch.
Yeah, this sounds right.
Jesus, it was a Brass
See,
Scorpion.
we got there.
Brass Scorpion, 2 Helldrakes, and then a half, I think it was 5 Defiler / Soul Grinders, and every one of them was all Mark of Khorne. So they'd used Angrath the Unbound as the tail for the Brass Scorpion, and then they'd used the plastic Bloodthirsters as the upper bodies of the Soul Grinders, and they'd used the Mutalith to kind of kit bash together to kind of make these weird flying dragony monster things. And the army itself would have cost, on the day, I think I worked it out to be about $3,000 for these literally 8 models. It was an amazing army to look at, but Jesus Christ. The important part about that army, though, and that was 7th edition, where line of sight was just as important as it is now.
Mm-hmm.
The dragons, so the 2 Helldrakes were on the flying bases. They used the Helldrake wings. They were positioned roughly the same way. They looked like Helldrakes. The Soul Grinders were just replacing the demon body with another demon. And the Brass Scorpion actually made itself easier to shoot because its silhouette got bigger without it taking up more space because its lower body and legs were the proper model.
Mm-hmm.
So, and that was done for a theme. It looked amazing.
Okay, so like the pirate ship.
Yeah. So, I think intent has to play a part in that. That sort of why you're doing it. I've seen people over the years use, before there were plastic Thunderwolves for Space Wolves, they would do up the plastic Khorne Juggernauts and put Space Marines riding those and use those as Thunderwolf cavalry. And you kind of go, well, they don't look like wolves. They look like big mechanical rhinos, but they're on the right size base. They're clearly a cavalry model. The guys riding them are armed correctly. Yeah. There is no present model for these. Yeah, that gets a pass. I've also seen people do a Chaos army called the Dark Wolves, which are essentially Trader Space Wolves. And instead of using the Thunderwolf cavalry, they literally just use the Juggernauts. That's in theme. again, right silhouette, right size, okay. The downside with doing that is you have to make it very clear to your opponent that it's a Space Wolf army, not a Chaos army, because there are Juggernaut riders in the Chaos army.
Mm.
So I think those counts as, particularly when you're using a model that is something else in the current game, you have to be very clear with your opponent what it is and why it is. Blue tacking weapons on probably isn't enough at that point. I've seen people do that, but I think you have to be transparent with it, because the second that you have a gotcha moment with someone because they thought that was something else,
Yeah.
that's going to leave a bad taste in someone else's mouth, and that's going to start causing issues for you, not just with the TO, but how people are going to treat you for the rest of the event.
Was that community as well, beyond that.
But I'm just going to scroll again and see if there's anything else.
So, Will, I don't know if you're still watching, but hopefully that's answered your question. If not, we've jabbered on for 55 minutes.
Yeah.
So...
I do like this NBN, though. We haven't had it drop out or anything. It's great.
You'll jinx it.
No, it's off peak. We've got full speed at the moment. It's fantastic.
All right. So I think we've pretty much covered.
Yeah, look, I suppose what have we got coming up? We've got, so like I mentioned earlier, the next video is going to go up on YouTube on Friday. It's all edited. I've just got to rewatch it and make sure that there's no swear words or anything funny like that.
A fly doesn't land on the camera.
Yeah, that was awesome. Nurgle game. Then we've got Linebreaker in just under 2 weeks now down in Albany. I think we've got 18 earmarked for that now, which is going to be awesome. Mm-hmm. And then WATC in April.
Glad we did cover it for you there, Will. Awesome.
WATC in April. We've already got 5 teams paid and signed up. I know of at least another 6 to 10 that are likely to come. So this is going to be a big day.
I'm aiming for 18 teams. I might have mentioned that once or twice.
16.
18 teams I'm aiming for.
I've got the tickets to 16, guys. So
well, you know what? If we sell out at 16, just message me and I'll sort you out. If you haven't already listened to it, we have done a podcast which talked about team events.
Yep.
So that was
episode
the
12.
last one that was up on the website.
Yep. Called Any Given Sunday.
Yep. We're definitely open to ideas for.
Yeah. What do you want us to cover in the podcast?
Chat about for these topics for the podcast.
Or if you've got a topic you want to talk to us about on the podcast, get in touch. And we're happy to do a guest spot with someone to talk about something specific.
Seriously, there's frowny, cranky faces. If you put cranky faces, I need a little message to tell me why you're putting a cranky face.
It's 10:30 at night.
Well, fair enough.
And then we've also today just put out the expressions of interest for Show 2018.
Yes.
So that's for TOs, that's for demo displays, you name it. Jump on the website. There's a little form to fill in and get in touch. We've already had a couple come through now. Mm-hmm. Show 2018, same venue. It looks like it's going to be massive though, because we've got a lot more people keen to come along as vendors and suppliers. We've got a whole bunch of, obviously all the tournaments that we've all come to know and love. We've got ATC for 40K coming over for the first time, which is looking to be 8 teams of 8, 64 players. It's going to be a huge part of the event. Mm-hmm. We're already talking to see what other authors and what other guests we can have come over. We obviously had Dave Annandale last year.
And Paul Kidd was there as well.
So
hopefully he'll come back again.
So we were already talking to a couple of other places about who we might be able to have come over to visit Perth, mm-hmm. hopefully on a slightly longer trip than the 38, 40 hours that David had from Canada. We've also got a whole bunch more role-playing stuff planned with a couple of the different groups in Perth, and then all the board games and everything as well, and a few other little surprises. But if you're interested in helping out with Show, fill in the form and get in touch. We'd love to hear from you. Mm-hmm. Other than that, we've got next week's podcast, like I say. Got any suggestions? By all means, send them through to us.
I really hope you're asking them and not me, because I've got nothing.
And then, we'll obviously have a wrap-up episode about Linebreaker when it's done and dusted, and we'll probably do some live stuff from down there if we can get the bandwidth as well. So,
and I'm sure I mentioned this last time, but we are also open for submissions for the blog. So if you want
particularly for game systems that, well, like I'm not active. Like if you want to write stuff for Bolt Action, Infinity.
Oh, actually, War Machine Hordes have got their champs this weekend.
Yeah, the WA champs this weekend.
I celebrant at a wedding on Saturday, but we might see whether or not we can head down there
on the Sunday and check it out.
And check it out.
Yeah. So yeah, if you want to write stuff for any game system, even 40K, I'm more than happy to consider it. It gives us an opportunity to have some voices in the WA community sharing stuff with not just the WA locals, but we've got a decent readership from around the world now. So if you feel like writing an article, either as a guest or as a semi-permanent spot, maybe writing an article once a month or once every couple of months, get in touch. We're more than happy to entertain those sorts of ideas.
The only thing is, the one proviso that we do put on that is that we do ask that the articles are positive and
yeah, don't go down the road of just being a flame war negative
because we won't publish
whinge,
it.
because it just won't happen.
Yeah.
I'm 100% with Emma on this, that we want the experience to be a positive one.
Positive and uplifting, and
it's all right to point out flaws, but it's not
definitely.
And criticize, like constructive criticism is always
feedback.
never.
I hate the term constructive criticism because
But-
criticism by its very nature is negative. So we talk about constructive feedback. I talk about constructive feedback.
But if you want to talk about some of the pros and cons of a new release or anything like that, that's completely fine. I suppose the tone is what sets it different.
Most definitely.
So apparently we're just being told that there's a team of Hortons coming to WATC, which is mildly
How
terrifying.
many Hortons are there?
I think there's 6 of them, so I think they could actually do their own team.
6
Six
Like-
Hortons.
sibling? Yeah, well, I know, but
No, siblings.
okay.
From what I understand,
Then
and
there'd be 8 Hortons at least.
well,
Generally takes.
I don't
2
know, if
to
I was the
make
parent of 6 Hortons, I would quite happily let them go off on a tournament and get a day off. But there's at least 3 of them I know who play.
Well, yeah, I know those 3.
Yeah, that's going to be an interesting day. Good luck with that.
Hmm.
I'm going to be somewhere else playing and avoiding it. If I get it painted, I'm sure I will.
Yeah, I'm sure you will as well the night before.
No, I've got to be packing the night before. It's going to have to be 2 days
That's
before.
true.
Anyway, guys, I hope you've enjoyed the
What does
conversation.
long war mean?
I don't know.
Seb, if you're still there, can you just elaborate on long war? What does that mean?
9 Hortons, Andrew says.
Well, only 6 of you can come. Or you've got 1.5 teams there.
Or some of the older Hortons need to start having kids. Or getting partners. Just getting married. Then you start adding Hortons by marriage.
By default, yeah.
And we've got a
Okay.
marriage celebrant who does weddings that can help you out with that stuff.
So it's been lovely chatting to you tonight.
Yeah, guys, thank you very much for joining us for this hour conversation. It's kind of like our podcasts, but unedited.
With much less focus.
Yeah. But we hope you enjoy chatting to us. Hopefully the sound has been all right for you guys tonight. It sounded all right in the headphones, so I hopefully can stop wearing them in future videos.
Look like it. No, never mind.
Yeah, thanks.
All right.
We will
see you, hopefully, Linebreaker. Come on down. Spend a
come to
weekend
Albany.
with us.
But otherwise, you can check us out on YouTube and obviously the continued updates on Facebook and the podcast in a week's time. And we'll have
Please
updates.
subscribe to YouTube because
Yeah, we've got 99 subscribers. If you subscribe to anything on YouTube, can you do us a favor and jump on YouTube and hit the subscribe button for the OBSEC page? Because
just because
it's nice to see milestones. We're that
Yeah.
close to 1,000.
There's another cranky face.
We're so close to 1,000 likes on Facebook as well.
I know, it's killing me.
We're getting there. We're
All
getting
right, we're gonna hit end broadcast now. So nice to see you.
Oh, hang on. Seb, you were asking who to bring out for show. The Long War guys. I've actually met the Long War guys at LVO. So Kenny and so there's all those negative. See, this is what happens. They're
I know.
baiting you now.
I know.
Thanks for the idea, Seb. I've spoken to Kenny a few times now. I'll have to get in touch and see what their movements are like and what their availability would be. But there's no harm in asking. So I will. The other 3 will be honorary Hortons. Thanks, Stu. We'll hopefully hear and see from you guys soon.
Awesome.
But have a good night, guys. Take care.